Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 806 for February 16th, 2020. Coming up in a few minutes.
You sort of feel like you're strapped into like a roller coaster. You know, the lap belt comes down and you can't get out until the ride is over. That's kind of like the initial feeling of it all. But I feel like, you know, this little compartment in my brain opened and released like an extra amount of strength for me.
Una Green is the U.S. West Coast brand ambassador for the Dewar's single malt Scotch whiskies from Aberfeldy and Pregeliki, just to name a few. But that's not the first thing you'll find on her Instagram profile. It's a single word: survivor. A year ago this past Thursday, Una's world changed forever when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. The good news? After a year of treatment, she's cancer-free and returning to work. She'll also be in Denver this week for the next round of Speed Rack. That's the competition for women in bartending that's now in its 9th season and has raised more than $1 million so far for the fight against breast cancer. I'll talk with Una Green later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Your Voice, and on Behind the Label, we'll look at the relationship between bottling strength and flavor when it comes to whiskeys. It's all just ahead on this edition of WhiskyCast.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch whiskey, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Let's start with the news. It's brought to you, as always, by Heaven Hill Distillery. Friday evening, the Trump administration announced that the 25% tariff on single malt whiskies from Scotland and Northern Ireland will remain in effect, along with liqueurs from Ireland, the UK, Spain, Germany, and Italy. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative had been reevaluating those tariffs as part of a wider review of the $7 billion package of tariffs imposed in October after the U.S. won its 14-year-old aircraft subsidies case against the European Union. While there have been some talks between the U.S. and Europe since then, European officials have been reluctant to change their position on the subsidies. They're waiting for a World Trade Organization ruling in their own case against the U.S. over similar subsidies for Boeing. That ruling's expected in the next several months. In the meantime, U.S. officials have been debating whether to put more pressure on Europe by not only increasing the current tariffs to as much as 100%, but possibly add more exports to the list. While whiskey industry leaders quietly expressed some relief over the weekend that the tariffs were not raised, the louder call continues to be for complete elimination of the tariffs on both sides of the Atlantic. And here's why that's important. We got new data this week on the impact of the whiskey tariffs imposed by both the European Union and the United States over the last 20 months. Let's start with Scotch whisky, where we've previously reported that exports to the U.S. fell by 25% during the final 3 months of 2019 after the tariffs took effect. Now, customs data released this week by the Scotch Whisky Association shows that quarter's results led to a 7% decline in the volume of exports to the U.S. for all of 2019 over the previous year. The U.S. remains the most important export market for Scotch whisky by value, largely because of demand for premium blends and single malts, but India leapfrogged over the U.S. to become the number 2 market behind France for exports by volume. Globally, the value of Scotch whisky exports grew by 4.4% in 2019 to slightly over $6.3 billion, while exports by volume grew 2.4% to the equivalent of 1.3 billion 70 CL bottles. Now, Wednesday, the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States had its annual economic briefing in New York City. While domestic sales are at an all-time high, tariffs cut into the export market with a global impact. The European Union's 25% tariff on bourbon and other American whiskeys dragged down 2019 whiskey exports by 27%. In real terms, $186 million. Whiskeys account for about 2/3 of all U.S. spirits exports, and even with the tariffs, the EU still accounts for slightly more than half of all U.S. whiskey exports worldwide. The overall result? American whiskey exports fell by 16% worldwide during 2019. Discus CEO Chris Swanger called the impact of the tariffs devastating on both sides of the Atlantic.
Impact on American whiskey hurts multinational companies, right? Impact on single malt Scotch or cordials or liqueurs impacts major U.S. investment here. So what's unique about our industry is we're so interconnected and aligned, right? And the fact that we walk into meetings with the EU or with the Trump administration, and we're walking in with our European counterparts, very much resonates. And 2 weeks ago when we were in Europe, we were sitting there standing side by side with our European spirits partners. And I think eventually we'll make progress, but we're grappling with a volatile trade environment. I would say, on behalf of the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, we recognize and can appreciate, the Trump administration is trying to grapple and address some long-standing trade barrier issues, having nothing to do with our industry, right? Steel, aluminum, aircraft parts. And unfortunately, we've just been suffering from collateral damage as a result. It was very, very unfortunate that the EU imposed a 25% tariff on American whiskey. And I think our biggest hope is we're an aligned industry and working hard to try to resolve it.
7 of the top 10 U.S. whiskey export markets were affected by the European Union tariffs. Only one saw a year-over-year increase in exports: Latvia. And that's only because Latvia serves as a shipping hub for goods going into Russia and other Eastern European countries. 2018's top export market for the U.S. was the United Kingdom, with shipments valued at $150 million. In 2019, the UK fell to third behind Canada and Japan, with a 33% drop to just $101 million. So, are you ready for some good news now? We also got the latest tourism numbers out of Kentucky this week, and bourbon-related tourism skyrocketed once again last year. More than 1.7 million people visited the 37 distilleries on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail and its craft tour during 2019. That's up almost 23% from 2018, and more than 70% of those visitors came from outside of Kentucky. Now, those numbers do not include visitors to Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, which is not part of the Kentucky Distillers Association or the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. Buffalo Trace also had a new record with around 294,000 visitors, up 35% from 2018. Buffalo Trace has started work on yet another expansion of its visitors center, which was last upgraded in 2015. The work will be done in stages throughout this year to minimize the impact on visitors. By the way, there's word of at least 3 more distilleries planned for Kentucky, with 2 of them to be owned by African Americans. Fresh Bourbon Distilling Company plans to start work on its new distillery in Lexington later this year. Fresh Bourbon has been distilling under contract for the last couple of years at the Hartfield & Company Distillery in Paris, Kentucky. In Louisville, the Yarbrough brothers plan to open a micro-distillery on the city's west side this summer. They'll be releasing their first sourced bourbon under the Bro Brothers bourbon brand this spring. Their partner in the project is Victory Global. That's a UK-based import and export company. Louisville Future reports plans are to export most of the distillery's production while holding some back for sale at local retailers. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army veterans behind Horse Soldier Bourbon have purchased a golf course in Somerset, Kentucky, near Lake Cumberland, with a goal of building a $50 million distillery project on the site. They'll be releasing more specific plans this spring. Heaven's Door, the American whiskey brand in which Bob Dylan is a partner, has announced plans to export its bourbon and rye whiskeys for the first time. Great Britain, Germany, and Canada will be the brand's first export markets, and CEO Mark Buschala says the timing works with the 55th anniversary of Bob Dylan's first European tour.
Obviously, building our presence in the U.S. was key, but certainly we wanted to have a toe in the water early on. We're not going to be very aggressive in our rollout there, but we wanted to be in markets where Bob enjoys a lot of success and where we see opportunity as an American whiskey maker. So the UK and Germany are great markets in that regard. We do have a plan to expand into several other markets in Europe over the next 12 months. And Canada, for the same reasons, it's a good market for American whiskey, and it's close to home. We think we understand the consumers well. So it's really kind of addressing mostly the requests for product in those markets and getting in earlier than we would probably do otherwise with with a brand that wasn't associated with Bob.
Did that overcome the impact of the export tariffs, at least in the UK and Germany, on American whiskeys?
Well, I mean, the tariffs are, they're not good for any consumer or for any brand. It's just a cost of doing business right now. So, you kind of bite the bullet. You either do nothing or you have to take the hit, and that's what we're doing.
How's the distillery project coming along? We haven't heard much about that in the last few months.
It is moving apace. We control the land that's contiguous with the church, and we've been investigating building a boutique hotel as part of the overall project and development. And so while we're kind of fleshing out that opportunity, we've just put the construction of the distillery and brand center on hold. We see an opportunity to really have this as a fully integrated project with a boutique hotel there. So we're, talking to the various partners as operators and exploring how that might affect the overall design and project.
Adding a hotel to the project will also require Heaven's Door to go back to Nashville city officials to get additional planning approval. Let's talk about new whiskeys now. White & Mackay has unveiled a new 51-year-old Dalmore with just 51 bottles available worldwide. The price tag, £55,000. That's about $71,700 each at current exchange rates. And by the way, 2020 marks the 50th anniversary for Richard Patterson with the Dalmore. Douglas Lang & Company is entering the travel retail business with a new series of whiskeys in its remarkable regional malts series. The Global Travelers editions of Big Pete, Scallywag, Timorous Beastie, the Epicurean, and Rock Island will all be bottled at 48% ABV in 1-liter bottles. They'll sell for around £50 or $65 each. Glendalough is coming out with 3 new Irish whiskies, including a pot still whiskey finished in virgin Irish oak casks harvested near their distillery. It'll sell in the U.S. for about $55 a bottle. There's also a new 17-year-old single cask finished for 2 years in Japanese Mizunara oak, and a new 25-year-old Irish single malt finished in Irish oak casks. The 17-year-old will sell for around $300 a bottle. The 25-year-old has a recommended retail price of $500 a bottle. I received samples of all 3 this week. I'll have my tasting notes for them soon at WhiskyCast.com. I'll be heading to Seattle this week to cover the World Whiskey Forum being held at Westland Distillery. But the day after the forum ends, Westland will be unveiling its brand new whiskey produced in collaboration with Filson, the clothing and outdoor goods company based just a few blocks away from Westland. Coldfoot is a limited edition single malt that's bottled at 50% ABV, with just 978 bottles available for around $100 each. It gets its name from one of the Klondike Gold Rush mining camps of the late 1800s in the Pacific Northwest. Filson, for its part, is producing a line of Coldfoot gear that will go on sale at its website and stores in Seattle, New York, Boston, and Portland. There will also be Coldfoot events at each store over the next month or so. And finally, this is the week Speyside whiskey fans have been waiting for all winter long. The Spirit of Speyside Festival is out with its schedule of more than 700 different events for this year's festival, which runs from April 30th through May 4th. Tickets will go on sale this Wednesday on the festival's website starting at 12 noon GMT, and based on past history, many events will sell out quickly. Last year's Spirit of Speyside Festival drew visitors from 54 different countries. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Larceny Bourbon's heritage goes back to the days when Treasury Agent John E. Fitzgerald was patrolling the rickhouses of Kentucky, not just for the feds, but also for himself. It seems he was stealing tastes of some of his favorite barrels of wheated bourbon on the side. Today's award-winning Larceny Bourbon has that same smooth, soft character Fitzgerald loved. Look for 92 proof Larceny Bourbon at your local retailer, and be on the lookout for the new limited edition release of Larceny Barrel Proof. You can always find out more at heavenhilldistillery.com. Think wisely, drink wisely. Don't forget to listen to our special coverage from Whiskey Galore's Dramfest 2020 in Christchurch, New Zealand, the weekend of March 7th and 8th. And if you're going to be in Christchurch that weekend, please join me for a special whiskey tasting on Friday evening, March 6th at the Carlton Bar and Eatery. I've posted links to get tickets on our social media feeds and at the WhiskyCast website, and I really do hope to meet some of you there. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, and we have a lot going on over the next few weeks. The Chicago Whiskey and Wine Festival is this coming Saturday, the 22nd, along with Distill America, just up the road in Madison, Wisconsin. Julio's Liquors in Westboro, Massachusetts, has its annual Go Whiskey Week of events. It runs from the 25th through March 1st. The Whiskey Exchange is hosting a Tour of Australia charity tasting at its Covent Garden store in London on the 27th. And the Aussie Spirit Auction for wildfire relief is on the 28th in Sydney, Australia. The Newcastle Whiskey Festival is on the 29th in Newcastle, England, and the Whiskey Riot Festival is that night in Buffalo, New York. Bonham's has its next auction of rare whiskies March 4th in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the International Malt Whiskey Festival is the weekend of March 7th and 8th in Ghent, Belgium, along with Craft Spirits Berlin and the Spirit of Amsterdam International Whiskey Festival. Right now, we have 276 different events around the world on our searchable calendar at WhiskyCast.com. Just click on the search button to find out what's happening near you or wherever you'll be traveling soon.
The search never ends, but it's nice when you can come in for a landing, pause and explore the silky smoothness of single pot still Irish whiskey, matured in the finest bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks. Land on Redbreast, then be sure to pass it on. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock. This is a story of strength. Not the kind of strength that you see when people push around 500-pound barrels of whiskey, but inner strength. You know, the kind of strength that helps you fight a battle within yourself. Una Green is a brand ambassador for the Dewar's single malts based in Los Angeles. A year ago this past Thursday, she got the news that tends to stop a person in their tracks. She was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. Now, many people being treated for cancer choose to retreat into themselves just a bit after getting news like that. They prefer to fight their battle privately with just their family and close friends. And of course, that's perfectly understandable and reasonable. But it's also not the path Una Green chose. She's been sharing the progress of her treatment on social media and actively supporting the Speed Rack bartending competition for women. That program has raised more than $1 million for breast cancer programs over its first 8 years. And when Speed Rack Season 9 hits Denver this week, Una Green will be there to cheer on the competitors. We spent some time on the phone this week. Let's first of all talk about the happier stuff. You're coming back to work, right?
I am. I'm returning to work on March 16th with the Single Malts crew. I'm very, very excited about that. We'll be convening in Louisville, and we're going to spend a whole week doing the Bourbon Trail, taking tours, getting reacquainted, and just focusing on the new year.
It's got to have been rough for you the last year. I know that we're talking as you're marking the first anniversary of your diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
This has to have been arguably probably one of the worst years you could imagine, right?
Yeah. Tomorrow is actually will be my 1-year anniversary. My diagnosis, it was the day before Valentine's Day. I found out that I had stage 2 breast cancer, and it was very shocking because it doesn't run in my family. At the time, I was only 37. Right now, I'm 38. And it was definitely a shock to the system. I felt like I was sort of like flipped upside down and shaken, like sort of mugged in a way, But in a lot of ways, it's been a road, but it really has opened my eyes to a lot and has taught me a lot. And especially just being so grateful for life, for like waking up every day and just breathing, But I'm here. I'm on the other side of treatment now, and I can't be more excited to just keep moving forward and getting back to life in LA and doing what I love to do.
What have you learned over the last year, not only about life, but also about yourself?
That I'm stronger than I thought. I think when I got my diagnosis and I started going through the process of everything, you sort of feel like you're strapped into like a roller coaster. The lap belt comes down and you can't get out until the ride is over. That's kind of like the initial feeling of it all. But I feel like, this little compartment in my brain opened and released like an extra amount of strength for me that I didn't know was there. And I really believe that anybody can go through this and get through it. You just have to kind of keep your eyes on the prize, always know that that light is there and that you can get through it. You really can. Your strength is there. And that's what I found within myself. But I also, couldn't have done it without the support of my friends and family. And also, having that support system surrounding you, even though like most of my family is in Boston, it was just, they're everything to me, and my work family as well. They're very supportive through the whole thing as well. So we're just very fortunate in finding that strength.
You've been very open about sharing your journey over the last year with people in the whiskey community. What's it been like?
Yeah, I felt compelled to share my story. I just felt like it was really important just to be sort of vulnerable and open and honest with everything. And so I started posting here and there, and I find that a lot of people who reached out, I have like just a surge of support and understanding and love. I got lots of flowers, which was beautiful. It was just an endless amount of support that I received, and I didn't think, it was just an overwhelming amount of support. It still is, and it's wonderful and beautiful, and it makes me feel less alone in the process, because it is sort of a solitary thing when you're going through these treatments. It's a physical journey, sure, but it's a really big emotional process as well. Having to get a mastectomy, losing your breast, like that as a woman is very difficult. But I have some great doctors, and they're like Humpty Dumpty. They're going to put me back together again. So I'm not worried. I'm fortunate for that too.
A lot tougher than an eggshell, I think.
Yes. It's true. A lot tougher than an eggshell. But in Los Angeles, which is a wonderful place to be for that kind of reconstruction, my surgeon is really wonderful. So I'll be getting my reconstruction surgery this summer. I have to still get that on the books. And that's something I plan on doing once I get back to Los Angeles.
This may be a bit of an off-color thing, but gee, plastic surgeons in Los Angeles, who would have ever thought?
I know, right? It's a good place to be. There's another thing I'm grateful for, There's always that silver lining. That's the thing that I always think is important in any situation, in life in general. No matter what you face, is like there is always that light, and that there is a positive outcome, I believe. It's about your mindset. I think it can really cure you in a lot of ways.
One of the things that you've posted a lot of photos of is your hair loss. And those who knew you earlier in your career know about that mane of red hair that you have, or had at the time. And it's coming back, but that was sort of almost another trademark of yours too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I pretty much have had the same hair my whole life. It's always been like big, red, curly, down my back, really thick. I'd have to like comb through, conditioner it in the shower. It's a lot of maintenance, but I loved it. And when I first had my interview to join the single malt team, I really worked that. It was sort of my thing. I was compared a lot to Brave, Merida, the Pixar character, the Scottish princess. So when I lost it, I thought it defined me so much, is what I'm trying to say, is when I thought it probably even helped me get my job, in a lot of ways. It couldn't hurt to have like this crazy red hair to sell Scotch whiskey, So losing that, I was terrified when I knew that I needed to get chemotherapy and that I would most definitely lose all of my hair, my lashes, my eyebrows, everything. I was terrified. But you have to like rise above that fear and realize that it's really about living, and your life is at stake, and it's just hair at the end of the day. But I also have a friend who is a wig maker, and he's been a longtime friend of mine in LA. His name's Jay Fink, and he actually makes wigs for drag queens on RuPaul's Drag Race. He has about 6 clients from that show. And so when I was faced with having this hair loss situation happen, he told me that he would help shave my head when the time came, and that he would take my hair and make it into a wig for me. And that's something he's still working on. as you can imagine, it takes us quite some time to produce a natural hair wig. But I'm his first cancer patient wig, and it'll be something cool to have. And it's kind of a special, unique story that we have. And that's something I also posted on my Instagram is when he shaved my head. And that was just like, it was such a real emotional time for me. And I'm just grateful as well for him and his friendship and his career journey that led him down this path to eventually helping me with my whole hair loss situation. But I am definitely kind of enjoying this little like short buzz cut thing that I have going on now. So it's exciting to just have hair again.
You've also sort of become the poster woman for Speed Rack, and you're heading out there almost as soon as you get back to the West Coast this coming week for the Speed Rack in Denver, which is a charity. Well, have you explain it. For those who are not aware of what Speed Rack is, go ahead and tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Speed Rack is an amazing organization that was started by two women, Ivy Nix and Lynette Marrero. They created this bartending competition. It's an all-female speed bartending competition, and it's kind of run in a March Madness sort of style. So basically, they have many women apply every year. So for like each region, let's say there's about 150 applications. From there, they pick about 60 girls, and then those 60 girls try to make 4 cocktails as fast as they can. And then the 8 fastest times from those 60 will compete head-to-head on stage. The first fastest time faces the 8th fastest time, and then the second goes against the 7th, and so on and so forth. And then they narrow it all down to the final competitor. But they have to make cocktails, classic cocktails, as fast and as accurate as possible that taste great. And it's all in the name of raising money for breast cancer. They've been in 9 seasons now, and we've raised over $1 million for breast cancer, which is remarkable. And each year it keeps getting bigger and bigger. The crowds are getting larger and larger. Each community really comes out and completely, fully supports these women that get on stage and do what they do best. They're some of the best bartenders in the country. Last year in season 8, my good friend Kat Corbo from Los Angeles, she took the national title. And so I'm so proud of her because we actually met at Speed Rack season 7 when we were both competing. We both represented LA. There was about 5 women from LA that went to San Francisco to compete for the West Coast. And that's how I met Kat. And that year when I competed, I made the top 4 for the West Coast. And that was really exciting for me. It was such an amazing thing to be a part of. It really impacted my life in such a hugely positive way. It's such an incredible sisterhood. And I'm so proud of that and so proud to be involved. And it's just super ironic that, by season 8, only like a year later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer myself. So I just feel like this really great responsibility to spread the word, to get your checkups, to do your monthly self-breast exams, and just to be aware of listening to your body and taking care of yourself. And I think it's important, especially in the hospitality industry, the liquor industry, any industry really, but I think as bartenders, you kind of, stretch your limits sometimes and you don't really listen to your body. I know this because I've bartended for a really long time. All through my 20s, I was like, oh, I don't need health insurance. Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong with me. But, now I'm like 38 years old and man, I just think just paying attention to your health, taking care of yourself is just extremely important. And I just feel a responsibility to get the word out to help others as much as I can. And with Speed Rack, they support women in this industry above and beyond breast cancer as well. So I'm just happy to be a part of that and want to always have their back in any capacity I can help. I'm there for them.
How did you make the transition from bartending to working for a brand? I know that that's where a lot of brand ambassadors have come from in the past. How did you make it work?
Well, I was a bartender in LA for about 10 years, and I got involved just by, supporting people's events, getting to meet other brand ambassadors that way. Also through cocktail competitions. I did a bunch of cocktail competitions through the years, and that also gets you some visibility with brands. And when Saint Germain was looking for an LA ambassador, the Saint Germain team, which is also owned by Bacardi, they were looking for professional bartenders in each community that worked at high-end cocktail bars to also be an ambassador. So we were kind of like hybrids. We were like half and half bartender, half ambassador. And I loved that. It was such a great balance for me. And it was a great way of like sort of dipping your toe into the brand world. And I just really took it and I made it my own. I love Saint Germain. I love the brand. The team was wonderful. We started off with about 6 ambassadors at first across the country. And then it grew. The 2.5 years I was with that team, it grew from 6 to about 22 ambassadors across the country. And we're all working cocktail bartenders. Some of us were bar managers and also brand ambassadors. So we helped bring that brand to life in each market. And I loved it. And then when the single malt team started forming, I really jumped on that opportunity because I thought it would be right up my alley and it would be a really incredible challenge to represent 5 incredible single malt whiskeys. So that's sort of how I got into it.
And the company, let's acknowledge, has been extremely supportive of you through your journey over the last year.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. I told them, I was like, I'll work for you guys for the rest of my life. I love you guys so much because they've given me time off and they've been holding my position. And I just truly, I've never felt more valued as a person, as an employee. I really, truly work with people that are just endlessly caring and endlessly generous and positive and just constantly always checking in on me and, making sure I'm okay if I need anything or if I wanted to talk or whatever, they've sent me flowers and so many well wishes. Pretty incredible. People tell me that's an extremely rare thing, when people go through illnesses like this. Not everyone is lucky to take time off and take care of themselves. And I'm endlessly so grateful for Bacardi and for taking care of me. I can't wait I'm excited and thrilled that I will be back to work in a month and I can just get out there and do my thing again. I just want to show them how much I appreciate them.
Life on the road for a brand ambassador can be tough. And you're jumping back in quickly here. How do you get your stamina back up to handle all the flights and the late nights and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I'm right now. I'm sort of gearing up my psyche to get back into all of the travel and everything in the late nights for sure. I think I'm going to have to approach some things a little bit differently than before and really pay attention to getting enough rest. But lately I'm starting to kind of work out again bit by bit. I go on a lot of walks and now I just started this 30-day challenge, the wall sit challenge that Thirsty Magazine is putting forward to challenge those in our industry to get more active. Last month they did a plank challenge, but I can't really do planks right now because my chest is too sensitive. But this wall sit challenge is right up my alley. So I've been posting about that on my Instagram, and you basically each day the time increases for the wall sit, and you just kind of squat and sit against the wall for as long as that day says. So today was like 40 seconds. Tomorrow will be 40 seconds. And then it increases over time all the way up to like 5 minutes, which I know that'll be difficult when it hits 5 minutes. But I think doing little challenges like that, and it allows me to stay in touch with friends and feel involved online. And it's a kind of a fun way to say hello to your friends and get active. I recommend it.
How do you approach life from this point on, knowing what you know now about mortality and about the fragility of the human life? How do you approach the rest of this journey that you're on?
Okay, I think that I think we just have to, all of us just have to approach life without fear, and just to practice gratitude, because every day is a gift, and that you should really be yourself. Don't be afraid of judgment, like judgment of others or judgment of yourself. I think people, do that a lot. I think it's having more of an open mind and just going after what you want in life and just being happy and trying to find joy and just be grateful. I feel like I say grateful a lot this past year in all of my posts that I write and when I talk, and it's because it's true. I feel like you need to lead with your heart in a lot of ways, and that's what life is really about, is truly like leading with your heart.
Wow. That is a wonderful attitude to take.
I believe that fully. I mean, I know it's not everybody has their ups and downs, and I sure do. I've had some really, really depressing days during treatment, and we're all human. We're not robots. Like, we gotta, if you're gonna cry it out, gotta cry it out. You gotta feel. You can't just bury things down. You gotta express yourself, express your emotions. Don't be afraid, and you just gotta be human, lead with your heart, be grateful.
And have a good glass of whiskey or two along the way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that makes everything better, really. It's true.
Have you been able to get back and enjoy a dram occasionally? I know you've been in treatment, and I know that that's something the doctors aren't crazy about when you're in treatment for cancer. Have you been able to get back and enjoy anything yet?
I have, yeah. When I was going through chemo, I really didn't have much of a desire to drink anything. But radiation is a little different, and, everything in moderation was okay. So, yeah, I've gotten to enjoy a little bit. I had a little bit of Aberfeldy 12, which is one of my brands, but it's so delicious. And, I'm just really excited to be able to enjoy again, try to get back to the way things were and just spread the good word of my brands and my love of whiskey, and see my team again and possibly go to Scotland again this year. That would be amazing. So I'm just grateful.
I want to thank Una Green for sharing her very personal story with us. And if you'd like to find out more about the Speed Rack competition, you can check the archives at WhiskyCast.com for my interview with Speed Rack co-founder Lynette Marrero. It's in episode 707 from June of 2018. We've also posted a link to the Speed Rack website in our show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. And that's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlock, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlock lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. And let's start off with a couple of Japanese single malts from Nikka. They were both released in 2019 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Nikka's Miyagikyo distillery, but did not make it to the U.S. until last month. The Miyagikyo Single Malt Limited Edition 2019 is a blend of casks from the 1960s through the 2000s, and it's bottled at 48% ABV. The nose has notes of Christmas cake, toffee, honey, and hints of dried flowers. The taste is sweet and fruity, with subtle spices that complement the top notes of Christmas cake, orange marmalade, and toffee. The finish is lingering and fruity with a soft touch of oak. I'm scoring the Nikka Miyagikyo Limited Edition 2019 Single Malt a 93. Now, the Yoichi Single Malt Limited Edition 2019 takes the same path, only with casks from Nikka's Yoichi distillery. It's also bottled at 48% ABV, but there's a very different distillery character evident here. The nose has a good oakiness and just a hint of smoke, along with vanilla beans and a touch of maple syrup sweetness. The taste has a good balance of barley sugar maltiness, along with cocoa and a nice peatiness that comes up slowly in the background, along with a hint of honey. The finish is very long with lingering touches of peat smoke, charred oak, barley sugar, and orange peel. I'm scoring the Nikka Yoichi Limited Edition 2019 Single Malt a 94. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. Rye whiskey was distilled by America's original risk-takers and history makers. Those first barrels of whiskey were bold, flavorful, and full of passion. Sagamore Spirit proudly picked up the torch with their spring-fed Maryland-style rye whiskey. It celebrates the grit and glory of those patriotic ancestors who sipped their way into American history. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com to explore their award-winning spirit. A couple of weeks ago, we heard from Wes Henderson about the new Angel's Envy Cellar Collection bourbon that's finished in tawny port casks. I received a sample of this 10-year-old bourbon that was finished for 10 months in those casks. It's bottled at 55.8% ABV, and the nose has notes of dried fruits, oak tannins, and just a hint of red grapes. The taste has spicy touches of black pepper, clove, and cinnamon, along with a slightly astringent mouthfeel, dark fruits, and just a hint of nuttiness. Now, if you add a few drops of water, it opens up the fruitiness on the palate and the spices on the finish, which is long and gentle without water, and has much softer spices along with dried fruits and cocoa. I'm scoring the Angel's Envy Tawny Port Cask a 93. One of the best things about going to whiskey festivals is the chance to discover something new. Last month, when I was in British Columbia for the annual Victoria Whiskey Festival, I did just that. Phillips Brewing and Malting has been supplying malted barley to the area's craft distillers for many years now, and they make some pretty good beer, too. Several years ago, they quietly added a distillery to their downtown facility. They call it the Phillips Fermentorium, and they unveiled their first whiskey at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. Small Talk whiskey is bottled at 41% ABV and is made with their own in-house malted barley. The nose shows that off with a good malty, buttery aroma that has hints of butterscotch, caramel, anise, and honey. The taste is fruity with a good maltiness and touches of orange peel, strawberries, anise, and butterscotch. The finish, long and fruity with subtle spices and a touch of maltiness. After I tried it at the festival, I pulled a few of my friends over to the Phillips stand to taste it, and it turned out to be a hit. I'm scoring the Phillips Fermentorium Small Talk Whiskey a 90, and I can't wait to taste their future whiskeys as they get older. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of 2,800 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out today at WhiskyCast.com.
From deep in the north, far beyond the wall, the howl of the frozen wind brings word of something new. A whiskey from the land of always winter, for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch Whisky, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Let's open up the inbox now for your voice. It's presented by Lot 40. A couple of weeks ago, we picked the Morgantown Whiskey Guild in Morgantown, West Virginia, as our latest Whiskey Club of the Month. Carl Schmidt is one of the club's co-founders, and he sent this email the other day. Thank you. It's a great honor to be chosen Club of the Month. I played your announcement from this week's episode to my wife and kids, as we often listen to WhiskyCast while traveling. Needless to say, they were surprised and excited. The kids enjoy when I try to guess what you will rate each whiskey based on your comments, mostly because I am usually wrong. I'll share this good news with the club, and thank you again. You always have a home in Morgantown, West Virginia. Thanks, Carl. And since I often drive through Morgantown on my road trips from New Jersey to Kentucky, I'll take you up on that offer one of these days. And by the way, there is still time to get your whiskey club into the running for our next Whiskey Club of the Month. We pick a new one on the first episode each month. All you have to do to nominate your club is get in touch with us. Just use the contact form at the WhiskyCast website. Now, as you might expect, our coverage of the whiskey tariffs and this week's economic reports from Discus and the Scotch Whisky Association generated a lot of comments, and some of them used language that I'd prefer to not repeat on this podcast, though. But Aaron Knoll at The Gin Is In on Twitter had this comment: tariffs don't work. It's sad that it's gotten to the point that we're celebrating that it's only a 25% tariff. The big boys will be just fine, but for smaller producers, importers, and distillers, this still hurts. Hashtag real talk. Hashtag sorry but not sorry. Professor Andrew Purchard of the University of Wolverhampton Business School tweeted from the UK, for those deluding themselves that UK-US talks will be lubricated by the special relationship, hashtag swimming with sharks. At Bourbon Whiz tweeted this question: is any of this due to the EU resistance to GMO corn? Did they address this? Well, that's a really good question, and if only it were that simple. There's not a single whiskey-related reason for the tariffs on either the European or the U.S. sides. The European Union imposed its tariff on American whiskeys in June of 2018 to retaliate for the Trump administration's decision to set tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum on national security grounds. The U.S. tariff came in response to that World Trade Organization ruling last year that favored the U.S. in its long-running case against the EU over aircraft subsidies to Airbus. Both of the tariffs make whiskey makers collateral damage in a much wider trade dispute. Finally, from the UK, at NickStilton47 posted this on Instagram, I assume with tongue firmly in cheek. I wonder if the UK government could apply a £100 million land tax to Scottish golf courses. Terms and conditions apply. Applies to all courses not under UK ownership. Of course, President Trump owns 2 golf courses in Scotland. And, Nick, yeah, that'll happen. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at WhiskyCast, or you can just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and all those other things that combine to make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. This week, Woodford Reserve announced the 2020 edition of its batch-proof bourbon, and that gives us the chance to look at just how bottling strength affects the flavor of a whiskey. You see, Woodford is usually bottled at 45.2% ABV, but this year's batch proof is bottled at 61.8%. So I asked Woodford Reserve Master Distiller Chris Morris to explain the differences between the two.
We take a standard batch of barrels that could be bottled as our classic 90.4 proof bourbon, but instead of proofing it down to the 90.4 presentation, we keep it at the proof the batch was. It will be approximately 110 to 120 barrels batched together as we're looking for our consistent flavor profile. But what makes it different from year to year is the proof presentation, because as we batch our barrels together, each one has its own unique proof, and whatever their proof is when they're combined is what we bottle the batch proof at.
How does proof affect the flavor in the final product?
Well, proof is part of flavor from the aspect, of course, of the chemical compounds, the alcohol content that deliver those flavors. But also, proof is one of the balances that keep certain barrel components in solution. The higher the proof, the more barrel components will be present. The lower the proof, more will be removed by the filtration processes that you usually use as you clarify your whiskey for bottling, because most consumers don't want little bits and pieces floating in their package with Reserve or any whiskey. So the higher the proof, the more suspended solids, oils, and other flavor components there will be in the whiskey.
Now I can just see some folks going, what suspended solids?
Well,
let's explain that for whiskey newcomers. What are those suspended solids?
Yeah, when you look at a glass of Woodford Reserve and you see that beautiful color, where does that color come from? That's dissolved wood extracts. That's caramelized wood sugars. That's toasted tannins. That is oak. And anybody who lets a glass of whiskey sit overnight and they come back the next morning and they'll see a residue in the glass if the whiskey's evaporated, those are those solids. But now there's no liquid holding them up. So it's all natural. It's going to be in any and every whiskey.
And this is a phenomenon called flocculation, right?
Yes, or precipitation, whichever term you want to use. Flocculation is more of, it could be too much calcium in the whiskey. Glass deterioration, yes, it does deteriorate over time. Anyway, so flock is another way of saying precipitation as well.
And chill filtering is what reduces and removes all that. And to some people, it affects the flavor.
Right. Now, you don't have to chill filter. You can filter with mechanical means, such as running through paper filters, fine metallic screens that might have an ionic charge to them. And you could certainly add activated carbon to your whiskey through an agitation process, and the activated carbon will collect some of these materials, and they will be caught on the mechanical filter as well. Or you could do all the above: chill, add carbon. It's up to what the distiller wants to do to the product. And when you are removing these compounds, you are removing some flavor, some aroma, and that's just the trade-off you do for whatever your ultimate result desired is.
And the reason this is done is so consumers will see the same presentation from package to package.
That's correct. Again, most consumers don't want to see sediment. They don't want to see cloudiness, etc. They want their whiskey to retain a clarity when they pour it on ice or add water to it. And then there are those consumers who do want to see that because they want the more original, robust flavor.
This year's Woodford Reserve Batch Proof will be available in select U.S. markets and a few international markets. The recommended retail price, $129.99 a bottle. Thanks to Chris Morris for explaining the connection between bottling strength and flavor to us. And if you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at WhiskyCast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot, a unique triple-distilled premium Irish whiskey, combining single malt and single pot still. First fashioned in the 1700s and still a rarity today. Sure, as we say in Ireland, what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copperpot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find links for our WhiskyCast HD videos and the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the whiskey photo of the week, the calendar of events, and of course a complete archive of past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. We love to get your questions and comments. You can always get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
When you land on something special, you just know. Redbreast, the quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey, and a proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
From far beyond the wall comes a whiskey for those who face the oncoming storm and never stop walking. Winter is here. White Walker by Johnny Walker.
White Walker by Johnny Walker. Blended Scotch Whisky, 41.7% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2020, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.